Cool. Okay, live number two. So I just got finished with another coaching call and wanted to share some learning, some things we went over. Um, so first thing that came to mind is the personal narrative. We had our first call on Tuesday of last week, or excuse me, Monday of last week. So Tuesday was kind of the first day they went at it, and did 4 for 4 on weekdays for the remainder of the week. Awesome. And then this week they didn't do yesterday, and the narrative was, oh, well, I did Tuesday through Friday last week. Let's just do that again this week. Completely normal. Okay. Excuses, reasons, whatever, the in between. These all are things that we want to, it's almost like whack-a-mole. Like these little reasons or excuses come up, like let's just smash them down, because most of them are not actually real. Most of them are not helpful. But just seeing a narrative and how on paper and from another's perspective outside of that moment, how silly they can be, even though they have so much power in that moment. It's like, oh no, no, no. We're so good at rationalizing ourselves out of doing the thing that we ultimately want to do in that moment, which led me to, okay, once we kind of double clicked on that, found some other reasons. It's like time, some other stuff happened in life, blah, 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 flat tire, whatever. So it's like, okay, well, how can we reduce the scope of this, even though we're just starting out with the habit, right? It's a 10-minute habit on weekdays that we're starting out with. How can we reduce that to have a, in the moment, small win, right? When your emotions are hot, when things feel really hard, when you're really tired, low on energy, how can you, in that moment, switch it to be a very small win? In the moment, it might still be hard, but instead of 10 minutes of the thing, it's like, hey, let's do 1 minute. What's that singular? Because let me step back. In the beginning, when we're creating a habit, the most important part, in my opinion, is to make sure we're getting that rep of going from cue to action, cue to action. We're trying to make that a seamless transition. And the way we do that is by getting reps. Okay. So the more reps we can get of that transition, which is why I also like doing dry runs and just like going through getting for 5 minutes, just run that 10-second loop just over and over and over to get your cue to action, cue to action, cue to action. Getting those reps in the beginning, because ultimately that's going to be what kind of, it's like the off ramp from one behavior to the next, from one highway to the next. That off ramp is the most important part, the directionality of it. The continuing is much easier, especially once you've ingrained that habit, right? The idea that came to mind was most of us, oh sorry, and the secondary learning here is the importance of upper limits, because what happened in the first week, it was, hey, I got my 10 minutes that I wanted to, then I did 30, then I did 20, then I did whatever, 15. And because of that, two things happened. One, you're able to create that narrative of, oh, I've already done so much, maybe I don't need to do it as much next week. Not good. And the other one, and the really important one, is when you have that fluctuation, then it's really ambiguous on when you're going about it. It's like, oh, that's open ended. I actually don't know how much I'm going to do. So it feels like this huge thing, right? Open end is infinite. So we want to, as much as we can in the beginning, decrease that scope. If you want, you can start with a range like, hey, 10 to 15 minutes, but no more than 15, right? We're capping that at a maximum, an upper limit, so that you don't go over, and so that you can properly forecast the amount of effort and energy it's going to take you to do that thing, which just provides massive clarity and allows us to not make that excuse of, oh, I don't have to do it because it's going to be too effortful or whatever it is. And pairing that with the small win, redefining the win in the moment, quite important things. So the next thing that we can talk about is the 1-to-1 ratio. So they wanted to change their surroundings a little bit. Now we've gone through and crafted and basically tried our best to make 1-to-1 associations with as much of their environment as possible. It doesn't need to be all of them, but if you think about each piece of gear almost involved in that behavior, or layers of context, like the couch, like the book, like whatever pieces are at play, the more that have the 1-to-1 ratio, the better. But it's also important of how we attach our mentality to that specific thing. We're not going to be able to have a new shirt for every single moment of our life, right? For example. So we can't have the 1-to-1 for everything, but there is one or two very important ones that we can make for us. In this case, he decided instead of going on the pillow that he uses on his bed on the floor for reading, which he wanted to do on the floor for whatever reason, he's going to buy a separate pillow, like a sitting pillow, specifically for that behavior. Because now, what brings me to the next one of the idea of transplanting a habit, which is more advanced, and we'll get to that when we've earned the first habit. But now it's kind of like once you've established this habit, then you can move it to wherever you want, right? Then you're able to transplant it from one area to another. An example, personal example for me with this is when I first quit my freelance stuff and I was really kind of doubling down on my business and coming back into it. All of my business work was very hard for me because I hadn't put my full effort towards it in the past. I was kind of skating by. And so I wanted to use a context with a completely fresh association. For me, that was my balcony. Okay, so I got string lights out there, made it really enjoyable. And when I was done reading, I would do all the same things, put my headphones in, and just open the door and go out there, take the cover off the couch and go out there and set a timer for an hour. So that was where I established the habit. But once it was established after a couple months, so I actually work better in my office. So, obviously, but I had all this leftover behavioral resonance from my previous job, working all that stuff here. And so it was a very difficult environment for me to go in. But once I established that habit, excuse me, out on the balcony, then I was very easily able to bring that in here. Because the same sort of domino transition happened, except for instead of opening the door and turning on those lights, I turned these lights on and come in this door, right? But it needed to be established. The effort needed to be lowered to get over that hump in the beginning for me to then be able to transplant it, right? It had to take root enough so it wasn't so susceptible, right? When you're actually propagating plants, they need to form some sort of root so that they can be planted in the soil. What else? What other learnings came to mind? I think, the other cool thing that I hadn't quite said before, because as he was talking about shifting your surroundings and trying to, I don't know, get the best scenario in the beginning. I'm like, look, that is a journey. You're not going to, just like your plan is not going to be perfect from the get-go. It's going to take some tweaking and some real trying, putting it into reality and seeing, okay, what actually works, what doesn't, let's shift it. In the same way, your context that you create is not going to be perfect from the get-go. But all of these different pieces allow us that, like the way I said it was like, think of these almost like notes that you're playing and you're creating a song to end up on that perfect chord, right? So we start with a chord and then we're like, this note's actually a little off. Like this pillow is actually off. So let's change that note. And then boom. And so as you're playing these different notes, the ultimate chord, your ultimate context, the milieu of your habit behavior is being formed, and you'll end up on that chord that you can just play very easily. Which makes me want to play some piano. So think of the different pieces at play in your habit creation journey as just potentials. And as we go further and further with this journey, the better and better we're going to get at knowing which note that behavior calls for, or that context needs to get rid of. And just thinking of it like, consistency is good, but consistent improvement is better. And we're working towards that perfect chord, the beautiful context. And the more musically inclined you are, to extend the metaphor, the more okay you are with hitting the wrong note, the better you are at hitting the right note, the better you become at hitting the right note. And then when you're starting fresh on the next behavior you're turning into a habit, once you've done it successfully with the previous one, it's like, well, you're starting off at a much higher level already. Like your game is increasing, your abilities are increasing. And so really stepping back and on this habit acquisition journey and identity change journey, having that view of, hey, I'm getting good at this skill of going from intention to behavior to habit to identity. That is the thing I'm practicing. Sure, reading as a habit is my vehicle for that practice, but having this bigger view, this long-term marathon mentality approach is what's going to allow us that sustainability in the long run. All right. That seems to be a good enough stream for now. If you have any questions, you can comment here. I think you can still comment on live. I'm still figuring it all out. But I'll see you in the next one. Nobody.